After a long, tiring day at work, a young black man named Marcus, age 24, was heading home. He worked in a factory, juggling between running machines and cleaning, and today had been especially tough. As he reached the bus station, he felt lucky to find a seat on the bus, which was always packed in the evenings. He'd been up since 5 a.m. and hadn't had a chance to rest. As he sat down, he noticed everyone else was busy with their phones or lost in their own thoughts. He was exhausted, and his boss had been extra harsh today. The bus stopped to pick up more passengers, and an elderly woman slowly got on. She looked weak, her movements unsteady, and all the seats were taken. She leaned against the window, clearly uncomfortable but unable to do much about it. She wished the bus would go faster so she could reach her destination sooner. Seeing her struggle, Marcus felt bad. He immediately stood up and offered her his seat, saying, "Hello, ma'am, please take my seat." The woman was surprised. She didn't expect such kindness in a city where people often seem too busy to care. She smiled, and with his help, sat down in his seat. Marcus stood for the rest of the trip. After just 3 minutes, Marcus had to get off the bus. As he was about to leave, he felt the elderly woman's weak hand tug at his jacket. Startled, he turned to see her hand slipping something into his pocket. Before he could ask what it was, the bus moved quickly, and other passengers started pushing him to get off. Once off the bus, Marcus reached into his pocket. To his surprise, he found a note with an address on one side and a strange code of 5 numbers. Queen Street, 88,687. Confused, he tried to figure out what it meant but decided to head home for some much-needed rest. At home, even after a quick bath, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the elderly woman and the note. Was it a trap? That night, he struggled to sleep, tossing and turning, unsure of what to do next. The next day, Marcus boarded the bus, hoping to see the elderly woman and ask her about the note, but she wasn't there. He looked for her again the following morning and evening after work, but still no sign of her. Marcus felt disappointed and more confused. He couldn't stop thinking about the note and what she was trying to tell him. After 2 days of wondering, his curiosity piqued, and he decided to visit the address on his day off. Friday was his usual day for doing laundry, but this time Marcus chose to check out the address instead, making sure it wasn't a dangerous trap. He boarded the same bus where he had met the woman, and after a 35-minute ride, he arrived at the destination. He saw no regular houses nearby, only a large estate with beautiful gardens and trees, giving the place a peaceful, natural feel. Once Marcus felt it was safe, he approached the big gate and knocked. No one answered, which made sense because the house was far away. Then he noticed a keypad next to the gate's lock. It clicked, the 5-digit number from the note. Marcus entered the code, and to his surprise, the gate opened. He walked through the large compound, eager to uncover the mystery. When he reached the front door, he pushed it open and stepped into a spacious living room. There, sitting on a sofa with a bright smile, was the same elderly woman from the bus. She seemed to have been waiting for him, looking relieved that he had arrived. Marcus was full of questions, eager to know what was going on. The woman introduced herself as Vivian. Marcus was curious why she had brought him there. Vivian first thanked Marcus for giving her a seat on the bus that day. She explained that she had visited a doctor and couldn't find a taxi, so she had to take the old public bus. Marcus politely declined her offer of a drink and asked why she had invited him to her home. Vivian hesitated for a moment, making Marcus feel uneasy as he waited for her to explain. Finally, Vivian took a deep breath and said, "I need a caretaker." She explained that she was sick and found it hard to move around her large house, especially since she was almost 70 years old. She needed someone to help her because her health was getting worse every day. When she mentioned the salary, Marcus was shocked. It was 6 times what he earned at his current job. Instantly, his worries disappeared, and he accepted the offer. Vivian had already hired over 7 caretakers before, but many of them had either stolen from her or quit because the work was too hard. However, she felt she could trust Marcus because he had shown kindness to her on the bus. Marcus only asked for a few days to sort out his personal matters before starting, and Vivian agreed, saying goodbye. As Marcus left, he felt a bit conflicted. He was excited about the new job, but also wondered about the challenges it might bring. He couldn't understand why an elderly woman would live in such a large house alone, though Vivian seemed kind and positive, and he was sure he'd enjoy his new role. When Marcus returned to his current workplace to resign, his boss was shocked by his decision. His boss even offered to pay him twice as much as before, despite having treated Marcus poorly for years. Marcus was surprised to see his boss upset. He hadn't realized how much he was valued. Still, Marcus had already made up his mind and politely declined the offer 2 days later. Once Marcus started working at Vivian's house, his tasks were straightforward. He made her breakfast, ensured she took her medication, helped set up her bath, did the laundry, and cleaned the house. In the evenings, Marcus would relax with a drink and watch his favorite TV show, which often lulled Vivian to sleep for hours. When Vivian woke up, she and Marcus often sat and talked. Vivian loved telling stories from her past, and Marcus enjoyed listening to her wisdom. Over time, Marcus became very close to Vivian, and her house felt like a second home to him. He always made sure everything was in order and that she had what she needed. Since Vivian loved Scotch eggs, Marcus made them for her every morning. She never complained, and he was always kind and polite. As time passed, Vivian's health got worse. She could barely walk, and her breathing became so rapid that it seemed her heart might give out. Marcus was always there to support her. He would read the newspaper to her, and they would watch operas on TV together. One morning, Marcus came into the living room with some pastries to surprise her, but what he saw scared him. Vivian was struggling to breathe. He quickly called emergency services, and an ambulance arrived in 15 minutes. They rushed her to the hospital, where doctors gave her fluids and medication. Marcus stayed by her side, holding her hand and praying that she would be okay. He felt lucky that he had arrived early that morning. 20 minutes later, Vivian woke up and smiled, thanking Marcus for being there for her. Marcus acted like he was just doing his job, but he knew it was more than that. That evening, Vivian was released from the hospital, and they took a cab home. Once home, Marcus made her scrambled eggs, then helped her to her room, gave her a shower, and tucked her into bed. It was late, and Vivian said goodnight. But Marcus didn't want to leave. The morning scare had really shaken him, and he knew that if he had arrived 20 minutes later, Vivian might not have survived. He didn't want to take any more chances. There were 3 extra bedrooms, so he planned to sleep in one of them. Even though Vivian thanked him and told him it was late and he should go home, Marcus insisted on staying. So, after saying goodnight, he went to one of the bedrooms, not realizing how much that decision would matter later on. Just after midnight, Marcus heard a strange noise, woke up, and went to check on Vivian. To his relief, she was peacefully asleep. But then he heard the sound again. It seemed like someone was trying to pick a lock. Marcus shrugged it off, thinking the gate was secure and needed a password to open, so breaking in would be difficult. A few minutes later, Marcus heard a loud scream. He jumped out of bed and ran to Vivian's room. There he saw a terrifying scene. A masked man pointing a gun at Vivian, demanding money and jewelry. Marcus knew Vivian was too weak to handle the stress, so he acted quickly. His reflexes were sharp from years of hard work, and he managed to disarm the intruder, knocking the gun to the floor. The intruder hadn't even noticed Marcus was in the house, so he was caught off guard. They fought, and Marcus, being stronger, overpowered the intruder, knocking him down. But as Vivian called 911, the intruder pulled out a small knife. Before Marcus could react, the man stabbed him in the stomach and escaped through a window. Though the knife was small, the wound was serious, and Marcus needed immediate medical attention. When the ambulance arrived, Marcus was rushed to the hospital. The doctors treated his injury, and after some time, he recovered. Vivian asked him to rest at home for a few days, but Marcus refused. He didn't want to leave her alone in case something worse happened. Marcus returned to work, taking care of Vivian as always. During their many conversations, Vivian learned about Marcus's mother, who had leukemia and needed a bone marrow transplant. They had been saving money for the procedure, but it still wasn't enough. Marcus's mother always reassured him that he had a bright future ahead and shouldn't worry too much. As time went on, Vivian's health got worse, and even the medication stopped working. One day, Marcus had to call an ambulance, and Vivian was admitted to the hospital. She was too weak to move, and the doctors did everything they could. But her condition was severe. Marcus, always hopeful, believed in miracles, and couldn't bear the thought of losing Vivian. He held her hand, encouraging her to keep fighting. As Vivian lay in bed, reflecting on her life with gratitude, she told Marcus to go home and be with his mother. But Marcus refused. He wanted to stay by her side. He begged the doctors to save her, but sadly, Vivian passed away at 4:20 while her body was being prepared for burial. Marcus stayed with her until the end, listening to her voice, which had become so faint it was barely a whisper. Vivian kept thanking Marcus for everything until she became quiet just before dawn. The monitor stopped beeping, and Marcus froze in shock. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Losing Vivian felt worse than when he lost a friend, as he had grown to love her like family. Vivian reminded him of his grandmother, and the news of her death hit him hard. His heart raced, and he almost had a panic attack. Tears poured from his eyes, and he cried so hard that his voice gave out. When he got home, he couldn't sleep and found it difficult to move on. He spent 3 days indoors, feeling overwhelmed by sadness. His mother heard the news and came to comfort him. A week later, Vivian was buried, and Marcus stood by her grave for the last time, whispering, "You will always stay in my heart." After the funeral, Marcus began looking for a new job. A few weeks later, there was a knock at his door. 3 men in expensive suits stood outside. One of them introduced himself as Vivian's lawyer and shared some shocking news. Vivian had left all of her estates and business investments to Marcus. At first, Marcus didn't believe it and laughed, but then the lawyer handed him some documents. As Marcus flipped through the pages, his jaw dropped. Vivian had been a multimillionaire, owning stocks in big companies. She had built her business from scratch, becoming a millionaire by the age of 30. She invested in real estate, never married until she was 40, and later created a foundation for children with several charity homes on her property. After Marcus saved her from the intruder, Vivian told her lawyer to leave everything to Marcus when she passed away. Marcus was now a millionaire, all because he had looked after her with kindness and care. He realized he could now afford the medical treatment his mother needed. Marcus felt deeply grateful. If he hadn't shown generosity and kindness those few months ago, his life would be very different. His actions had brought him a reward beyond his imagination.